but I really loved this, and this was like an absolute, there's a bug on my ceiling. Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I'm Tina. Today I'm doing a one-off book review of A Master of Djinn by Djèlí Clark. It's a fantasy with heavy steampunk alternative reality history vibes. It comes out next month on May 11th, 2021. So I received this book as an ARC from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. So thank you Macmillan Tor for that. I really enjoyed it. There are no spoilers in this review. So what is a djinn? For those who don't know, a djinn is a supernatural mythological being. It's similar to like a demon, but not really. The Western world knows of djinn as genies, you know, like in Disney's Aladdin kind of, but they don't all fall under the whole grant 3 wishes kind of deal. I'm not going to explain anything else about it or get too in depth because it's not my culture and I don't feel right kind of explaining it when really all I did was read a bunch of Wikipedia articles. So I'm not going to talk about that anymore, but that's kind of the general idea if you don't know, if you didn't recognize that word. Anyway, my favorite djinn, though, personally, is this Dingle Djinn. I'm just making a joke here, but seriously, this djinn is fantastic. It's very floral. I visited the Dingle Peninsula, that's what's called Dingle, when I was in Ireland a few years ago, and so whenever I go to like a UK airport, I always peruse the duty free for this particular brand because you can't get it here. Because where I live in Canada, which is generally a good place to live, you can't order alcohol from other places in the world just to your house. You have to buy alcohol at specific places, so I always have to like, you know, stock up at the duty free when I go. Anyway, highly recommend it if you live in the UK, if you can find Dingle Djinn. Very, very good. I really recommend it. What am I talking about? So yeah, what is this book? It's an intricately woven tale of fantasy and magic. Master of Djinn manages to be both complex and easy to follow with a compelling setting and enjoyable characters. So yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I didn't realize this until after I read it, but there are 2 preceding novellas that deal with the characters and the setting. But despite this, you know, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I am a person, though, that tends to like books that don't give me an exposition dump. So some people might be a bit confused at the start because it does kind of just start you off in this world, but I found it was pretty easy to kind of figure it out, and you know, you fill in the gaps yourself, and I really enjoy doing that, so I really liked it. So what is the story? The story follows Fatma, an agent for a government sector that focuses on the supernatural. So it's set in 1912 in this alternate history kind of steampunk version of Egypt. She's tasked with tracking down this murderer who also claims to be the reincarnation of this man called Al-Jahaz. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I did go on pronunciation.com to figure it out, but I can't pronounce anything, so sorry about that. This guy was a man who 50 years prior in this universe brought magical beings into our realm. And these magical beings have since acclimatized like to our societies, but they've also altered certain historical events. So these magical beings, as I explained, are djinn basically, but those are also demons and angels and kind of you name it. Any kind of supernatural being that you can think of that's kind of mythologically based is in this world now, kind of existing with humans. So Fatma, along with her new rookie partner and help from her girlfriend, must figure out, you know, who this man is and what he really wants before it kind of tears the city apart. So that's kind of the background. This is a bit longer of a synopsis than I usually give, but it needs a bit of a background if you understand kind of what you're getting into. The characters in this novel are a lot of fun. For 1912, I was impressed with the amount of female characters, especially written in a book written by a man. Usually a period piece like this, despite it being alternative history, writers tend to think that women existed kind of in the background because it was in the olden days. This simply wasn't true. It's just that a lot of our media that was written at the time was created by men who tended to leave women out. Like even if you watch a movie from the 1970s, women are comprised of like maybe 20% of background characters, which was not true at the time, but because the movies were all made by men, they didn't think to put women in. Anyway, Fatma does have to contend with these prejudices because it is still 1912, but I like that she was already kind of cemented in her role in the agency, so it's not another working woman dealing with sexism story. Fatma herself is really likable. She has this obsession with wearing fashionable, well-made suits, and that was referenced enough to make it like a personality trait, but not kind of repetitive. She was grouchy and a bit arrogant, which gave her flaws and kept her from being perfect. I really like that. You know, she makes mistakes. She tends to miss small details in her world, which seems weird when given that she's like a government agent, but I think it's more because she's a big picture person and she's looking at it from so broad, trying to figure out kind of the map, that she's not looking at like the individual little bits of it. The love story between her and her girlfriend was realistic and enjoyable, though I did think it felt a little bit flat in terms of development. It felt more like they were a long-standing couple than like a new kind of romance. The minor characters, though, were fantastic. I loved Ahmad, who is this crocodile guy, and each minor character was interesting in their own right. I really liked her rookie partner. She was really cool. I did want a bit more depth from everybody, but in truth, I think that would have taken away from the part that I really loved, which was the setting. I was enamored with the setting. Absolutely fantastic. My favorite form of fantasy is when mythological creatures are part of the real world, but, you know, not magical realism where everything is normal. There's like one small little thing. I actually don't like that genre at all, but I really loved this. And this was like an absolute, there's a bug on my ceiling. Don't fall on me, please. I'll get rid of you later. If I freak out in the next couple seconds, it's just a pill bug. It's fine. It can follow me. Okay. What was I talking about? So in this world, there's all forms of magical creatures running around with their own social caste and all unique powers. I also really liked that this took place just before World War I. It just like made my heart sing because I love World War I. I know that sounds really weird, but the build up to World War I is so fascinating. All the moving pieces that had to come together, the emerging technologies, the different kind of social movements, like it just, all of these little things came together to create this catastrophe. And so what I really liked about this setting was that it's clear magic has changed things. Like now Egypt is, you know, not occupied by Britain and is instead a world power. But it's still clear that World War I is going to happen. I wonder if the novellas deal more with this, and if they do, I'm definitely going to read them because I like this. Anyway, so tied to this, there's little bits of social commentary dropped here and there surrounding colonialism and racism and sexism and prejudice, which weren't overdone, but they were definitely poignant. I felt that there was the perfect amount of that because you can't ignore that facet, but at the same time, you don't want to be like, take away from the story by focusing too much. Like this is a fun mystery fantasy book. It's not meant to be like a political commentary novel. So yeah. The prose is fantastic. This book is so easy to read despite the complexity of the world building, and I really liked that it didn't need to explain things to like Western readers like certain foods or clothing. You know, we all have Google at our fingertips. If I want to look up what something is, I'll just do that. And, you know, despite how kind of bonkers the climax gets, it didn't feel like the author lost control of the story. There were some really funny lines too, as well as some tongue-in-cheek moments. You know, I laughed out loud at a few places, so it's definitely an enjoyable read. I rank books out of 5 criteria, and then I add up these points to determine my overall ranking. And while I gave the characters a 4 and the setting, readability, and prose a 5, the plot only gets a 3 from me because a few of the plot twists, specifically the major one, were very obvious to me. We don't get enough like red herrings to lead us away from the reveal, and one of the minor twists too was something I've been wondering the whole time. But, you know, the world was such a joy to be part of that I didn't even care about the mystery that much. I just wanted to see what, you know, cool-ass magical being showed up next. So, yeah, if you're like a hardcore mystery fan, you might find the mystery in this a bit simple, but the setting is just so much fun. I hardly noticed. So that's the end of my review. Basically, it's really good. I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it. I'm going to talk about a few spoilers, so it's basically just me listing off a few extra things that I loved, plus an explanation to why I found the plot too obvious, just for people that have read it. So if you don't want spoilers, just stop here, and thank you for watching. If you do kind of want to see what the other things that I got out of it, you know, stick around. Yeah, so thanks. So the plot. I suppose the plot couldn't have been too complex because the world was so complex they would compete with one another, so that's kind of like my excuse for not caring about the plot that much. But, and I wonder too if perhaps the novel was trying to say something about how Abigail was overlooked by the police and everybody in society. If so, I don't think that that worked because there were already so many strong women in the novel. If it had just been like Fatma on her own with like a male rookie partner and all the people she talked to were male, things like that, then I think that would have worked as kind of like a poignant kind of look at this. But I think because there were so many women in the novel, if that was the intention, it wasn't, you know, a strong enough point. The twist with Siti, that she's half Djinn, that also didn't surprise me at all. I always thought there's something seemed magical about her, so this didn't come as a surprise to me. I was just kind of like, oh, cool. That's convenient for a lot of things. I did want to say, though, that the goblin absolutely killed me. Minor part of the story. But until that party with the ambassadors, I hadn't even thought about the mythologies of the other nations. I just kind of assumed this was, I guess, kind of relegated just to Egypt. I don't know why. But then the goblin was there and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I guess, too, because that's kind of like my cultural background is I'm German. So, you know, those are kind of the myths that I grew up with, and the goblin's speech toward the other ambassadors was so funny. You know, it just kind of stuck with me. I loved how they made a buffoon of Bismarck too. That was so amusing. That whole party made me laugh. And the part where Ahmad chomped off Abigail's hand, I lost it. It was so funny. I don't know, it was amazing. He was kind of my favorite side character. I love how his story was built up throughout the novel too. You know, his creepiness, you know, his skulking in alleys, his showing up quickly. It was a really good way to kind of lay the groundwork for him able to sneak up on Abigail and to have, you know, the motivation to attack her. I absolutely loved that he was one that took her down, because it was, you know, his love of his life that got murdered by her. He had the most stake in this than anybody. I just love that he managed to kind of get his revenge. And then when he said he tossed the hand, I just died. It was so funny. Yeah, hands down one of my favorite characters. And I love how he like turned into a crocodile at the end. I was like, oh my god. The Marid, I think it's Marid or Marid, scenes were great too. And the angels, that part was really cool. I love how they kind of were bickering with one another. Honestly, all of it was so good. There was a really interesting line, though. The inside of the building functions as an extra-dimensional exponential space. For some reason, I really loved that line. I know I'm not supposed to quote from the book because it was an art copy, so hopefully I don't get in trouble for that. But I really enjoyed this book, and let me know what you think. If you read it and you don't like it as much, or you found problems with it, that's cool. Let me know. It's sometimes hard to approach a work critically when you really enjoyed it, so I would appreciate any kind of other insights that you have. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and have some gin with a G.